everybody. My name is Jack Ardrey. Unfortunately, we're having some camera issues on my end, so you're just going to be hearing my lovely voice instead of seeing my lovely face. But we have these three wonderful guys here with us today, so they are the main attraction as it is. So you'll get to see them just fine. But let's kick it off. Welcome to today's webinar, AI as a Business Strategy. I got these three lovely gentlemen here, Sal Marino, Mike O'Rourke, and Joe Nigro, all three with a pretty wealthy background in AI. So I'll give you guys a chance to introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about what you do, and why the people on the webinar today should listen to you guys. So Sal, you want to start us off?
Sure. Thanks, Jack. So for me, my name is Sal. I'm a Director of Finance and Operations here at Charles IT. We are a compliance and cybersecurity focused IT firm located in Connecticut, Middletown, and Stamford specifically. We really here just to try to help the businesses that we work with get a better understanding of how they can leverage AI to help them improve their processes and really turn it into more of a strategic asset rather than something that they shy away from. So I'm super excited to talk with these other great minds today and just get a little bit more perspective, and we'll see where it goes.
Great. Mike, you want to follow that up?
Sure. Mike O'Rourke. So I lead up AI at NASDAQ. NASDAQ, we use AI to fight financial crime, as well as to make our markets more transparent, easier to interact with. So I think buying and selling stocks a lot easier, as well as we use it for a number of our data products to help people understand what's going on in the market, where they should be investing, things like that.
And I'm Joe Nigro. I am an internet entrepreneur, built various businesses, and am a part-time investor, making investments in early stage companies, and most recently kicking off my own Gen AI business in the troubleshooting space for repairing, at the moment, home appliances. So looking forward to having a discussion here and answering any questions everyone has.
Great, thanks guys. So we're going to kick it off, and just so you guys know, as attendees, we have the Q&A and the chat open. So if you guys have any questions or comments throughout the presentation, we're going to keep an eye on that so we can get some real live questions answered. We're going to do this kind of as more of a panel. We're going to roll through some slides here and just have these guys talk about their personal experiences and what they've seen with each of these different areas here. So we'll kick it off. Whoever wants to start us out, you can feel free, but yeah, here we go. There's a little base slide for you guys.
Yeah, I don't mind. I'll start. For us, we focus highly regulated industries, and those are the people that they have certain compliance needs and different requirements that require them to be able to get the contracts that they have. And what we're seeing is an early adoption of AI, and then the question is, where does that land in that compliance spectrum? And right now, there is no regulation around the AI, and a lot of the different compliance sets don't have specific requirements yet either. But what we are seeing a lot of is the early adoption of them, and the companies that are adopting different uses for AI, they're seeing a lot of benefits, whether they're in manufacturing or the legal space. And a lot of it is happening in the financial spaces and different ways to analyze data. So that's where we're seeing it a lot, specifically on our side, which is the compliance and infrastructure managed IT front. Not sure if you guys have different use cases.
Sure. I mean, I guess I almost see like you've got the whole generative AI movement is kind of one thing, and then you have your classical machine learning, deep learning is another one. And the classical machine learning stuff, we've been working with that for many years now, and there's a lot of different products, and you can see like industries are working on the efficacy of those models to build that out. Gen AI has just exploded in the last like 6 months, and that's really good for wherever you need to create content, where it's hard to create the content, but it's really easy to verify that content. and you can create kind of co-pilots. And we see it like specifically for marketing communications, it's fantastic. Like if you're not using it to write your blog posts, you're spending too much time writing them. See, it's really good for legal. Like instead of having someone and paying someone to go through all these documents and come up with the right questions to ask, you could like shortcut a lot of your legal hours that you spend by taking documents, using Gen AI to say, okay, what are the things I should worry about? Help me understand this better, so that when you do interact with your lawyer, it's like you have like time well spent. You can like focus on things that are more meaningful, and you can understand the document better. The other one is in the area of engineering, where you're seeing Gen AI tools being used to create code, create SQL, and there it's fairly nascent. I'll say like we've just started rolling that out at NASDAQ, and the initial, we can see like we've got about a 30% acceptance rate. Like, so every time we ask it to write code for us, about 30% of the time we accept it. And so we expect that to continue to get better. But they're also like a lot of these tools don't support all of the languages yet. And so the usefulness of it is kind of like just at the baby stages where it's pretty good. It supports quite a few languages, but not everything we need. I expect that that's going to continue to expand. Even within the next 6 months, you can see the roadmaps for these tools have them being built out significantly.
Yeah. And I would definitely add to that too. I think Mike is right. It's at the infant stages right now. And I think one of the things to note is Gen AI specifically is really powerful when you're sitting on troves of structured data. And I think, when you think about the legal industry, the troves of structured data are, legal briefings and kind of lots of information that's existed for many, many, many years now. And so when you think about the kind of other industries like healthcare, same. And I think that's what's so powerful. But again, it's in the early innings right now. And I think that's just worth everybody kind of notating that, there are no quote unquote experts, specifically for sort of Gen AI, as we're kind of building out the momentum of where this thing goes in the future. But it's incredibly powerful, and it's really impressive what it's been able to do so far. And I definitely would allude to the fact that, if people are writing handwritten blog posts now, it's probably not worth your time. I've seen some pretty impressive long form articles being spun out by some of these platforms. So.
Yeah, and for me, I think one of the coolest things that I've noticed on the reverse side of what Mike was talking about on in regards to legal is really the cool part is basically taking that legal document, dumping it into into ChatGPT, and then being able to say, what are my risks, right? Like, what are the things I should be concerned about here? And then basically being able to break that down into layman's terms for you. And so that also saves you on the flip side of that conversation of really understanding it, or do I accept the risks before, I feel like I need to go back to my counsel and have that conversation. So there's a lot of really unique ways to be able to utilize it to your business advantage.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, guys. Let's move on here to the operational efficiencies that generative AI is showing. So you guys can go ahead and fight it out.
All right. Just looking at your slide here.
I think for us, it's back to the kind of similar to the previous slide, right? It's the efficiencies and things that you're starting to gain, where there's different types of AI to be able to create presentations for you based on entering like an outline, and it'll produce that presentation. You'll be able to create videos based off of entering a short prompt of text that'll create an actual video for you, or even modify the images that you're looking for it to create. I know we were playing around with it just to try to create different logos, and you basically just enter in the prompt of what you're looking for, and then you start making small tweaks to it, and that's just a few different use cases for how you can utilize it, but it can save your business time where you might have an outsourced marketing group that you need to go work with to get that content done, or you might use an organization to create the logos or some of the images and things that you need. But utilizing generative AI, you're able to do a lot of that stuff yourself, which is a huge efficiency boost because you're no longer waiting on someone else's time. You're able to just jump in and do it yourself right away. So that's where we see that happening a lot.
Yeah.
Mike, I know you had something there too.
Oh yeah, just like if you think of it as being like a nice co-pilot for not just for the engineers, but for this like brainstorming of like creative marketing or for creative ideas. A lot of times we're like, oh geez, we really want to come up with a name for this product. And then we'll just feed the Gen AI like all the attributes you want the person to feel or you want them to think about with this. And then you'll be like, now give me 20 ideas. And then you're like, okay, well, now you can like kind of, okay, well, that's good, but it's to this, it's to that. And you go back and forth. And sometimes if you're working with either a designer on a logo or you're working with a marketing person on like names or something, you know, if you ask them to go in a particular direction and then 20 minutes later, you're like, you know what, scrap everything I just said. Let's try a totally different direction. And they're going to get frustrated with you. But the Gen AI doesn't get frustrated with you. You can just, like, let's take a 10-minute tangent and try something totally off the wall and brainstorm in a different direction. And so it's kind of nice to be able to like go back and forth, see the feedback like instantaneously within seconds and iterate. So it does seem to not just for like creating new assets with code, but also like the creative aspects of your business. It's really nice to just have someone you can brainstorm and kick ideas off with.
Yeah, I think the important thing here is unbiased. I think that's what makes these co-pilots just fantastic is, there's no motive. It's trying to create the proper output of whatever the input is, and whatever you need, it's able to kind of give you different versions of it. And I think, again, like, there's just going back, we're at the early innings. However, if you can imagine, what this is capable of 5 years from now, I mean, gone are sort of the days of early stage technology businesses requiring 25 engineers in an office, ripping away at code. These co-pilots, for me specifically, I think out of these three, the co-pilot kind of portion of this is really where the value is sort of created, and being able to kind of build internal and external products and solutions that can help scale your company in a really massive way. So I'd say really digging into the kind of co-pilot sector is something that everyone should spend a lot of time doing. It's really impressive now, and again, in the future, it's going to get even better. So I just think it's really impressive.
Yeah, I completely agree with the co-pilot side of that. And I think just prior to starting the webinar, Mike and I were on talking about like Microsoft and their Office 365 co-pilot that's in like the pre-launch right now, and like the cool things that can do when you're analyzing a spreadsheet, and you can say, tell me what my top gross margin products are, and it will actually just do it for you, rather than you needing somebody who understands Excel to create the pivot tables, to pull that data. Like, it will start to do that for you. It'll even take an email and reword it so that it's super clear. And it's cool that those are different things that the technology can use, and it's going to really up everyone's game.
Yeah. You think from like a macroeconomic standpoint, if really several areas of society are going to be kind of streamlined, right? We think from the creative side to the financial, working with spreadsheets, presentations, writing emails, all of that is going to get some degree more efficient, right? So you can say, well, it's anywhere between like 5% and like 60%, more efficient than it is today. In some cases, maybe even more, depends on the use case. And then you apply that to the general population, and it's like, geez, the rate of innovation is really going to skyrocket over the next 5 years, and a lot of it just led by this tech. So you think about like those companies that are leaning into this tech those are the ones that are going to be getting a lot of the benefit. And even as like, thinking about yourself personally, most of these jobs, like, you won't be replaced by Gen AI, you'll be replaced by people who use generative AI. So if you're a designer, you should be leaning into these tools, not thinking they're the enemy. Lean into those tools and be like 10 times better designer than you were because you have them. Or if you're a coder, lean into those tools. I'm now 10x, type of coder because I leverage the tools.
Yeah, great. And I mean, moving forward with all these people learning this generative AI and using it as an assistant to their work, obviously there's going to be ethical considerations. So we can dig into some of those. With every business function, there's obviously going to be some sort of ethical consideration. So talk a little bit about this. Joe, you want to start us off? Joe might be frozen. Mike, you want to start us off?
Sure, I can start you off. So I think, a lot of the ethical concerns we had before, like with the advent of even the internet, right? We had a lot of ethical concerns around privacy of data, PII data. You see in Europe, they had GDPR that came out to protect people's private data. And that's now even more important because we've got these generative AI tools that make it so much easier to actually ask questions in a really quick, easy way about things that maybe they shouldn't be able to ask questions about. So as you're implementing these things, most of this is about safeguarding the people's data and making sure that the actual models don't have access to like PII type data, or if it does, it's very segmented. And then I think as far as like the biases, it really, before you launch one of these products, you should be like if you're building it into your products, you should be actually having an evaluation of is this actually making decisions in an ethical way? And depending on like where you are in the maturity, like how large your company is, like larger companies, NASDAQ included, has like an ethical AI council. And we actually look at these things and they have to get approved before we would launch them out into the world. That may be, if you're a smaller business, you're like, okay, I don't need a whole council for this, but you should be analyzing that before they go out into the wild. Because you can very quickly misuse customer data and then ruin the trust between you and the customers.
For me, I guess more of a question, and Mike, you might know the answer. I'm not exactly familiar on it, but I believe you can. Is there like a private instances of the generative AI that you can like subscribe to for someone who may fall under some type of compliance or something like that? That's something that I'm not 100% up to speed on, but I believe it exists.
Yeah, most large companies, like if you think like bulge bracket banks, things like that, they've all blocked access to ChatGPT. And the case in point is the Samsung situation where leaked data was given away because they put it into ChatGPT. So, and at NASDAQ, we have training in only very specific use cases do we actually enable users to use ChatGPT. And for everything else generative, we have to have internal instances within one of the cloud providers where we have a private walled garden where we use this, where our data can't leak. So you should be really careful about what you paste into ChatGPT. You should just assume that if you're pasting something into ChatGPT, that it's as if you just put it out on social media. Like that is now in the public domain, because it could be leaked. So the safeguards just aren't there yet.
Yep. Got it. So what about like, I think for me, part of this is a lot of people like to use the generative AI to output some data or something that they're looking for an answer on, then 100% trusting exactly what they see. And I think that's back to the original conversation of like, it won't replace people, but it'll make them better or more efficient. And I think that's the part where you have to really understand the things that you are getting as an output out of like a chat GPT and verifying what you have there. So like maybe the right thing to do is not to create all of your legal documents out of that, all of your agreements getting generated directly out of chat GPT and then just sending them off. But it's a great place for you to make your first pass through. And somewhere that we've seen a lot of that recently is even in creating like cybersecurity policies and best practices, where you're able to basically source some of the best policies and procedures that are out there and get them at your fingertips to figure out where and how they make sense for your organization. And so that helps as a huge, ramp up and starting point, and something that we're seeing a lot, especially in our space.
Yeah. And even you could do even iteratively, like your rough draft, you could have it generate something, then you can spit it more data and say, now modify it in this way, and have an iterative session with it. And then you get like okay, I now have a rough draft that I can put into Word and start crafting all of our own specific, changes. But you're right. Like it could take like 90% of the work out of it, as long as I know what I'm doing. So it can make like really smart employees who know the domain a lot more efficient, but it also could be very dangerous. Like you give it someone who doesn't know anything and they have it generate it and aren't able to make those corrections, they could like, make mistakes a lot faster. Because it's not perfect by any means. In some cases, like there's some articles that just came out like in the last day or two, where like ChatGPT, things it was good at, it's now not so great at, because as they're retraining the model, it's actually getting better at some things, but slightly worse at other things. And so like, what yesterday was, creating a perfect document, maybe tomorrow it won't create such a perfect document, and you're going to have to do more modifications.
Yeah.
Great. I mean, and Sal, just like you just touched on, how it can help to write policies or help with your security. We're going to talk a little bit about how it can help enhance compliance for those regulated industries, and even for those industries that just want to follow a base framework. You guys can dig in a little bit here. We got some questions to answer. So what do you guys think? If you want to kick us off, Sal.
Sure. Yeah. For me, I talked about the policies before, and it's definitely a place that we're seeing, a lot of effort being put in on the front end, specifically for organizations that are doing this themselves, because when you're doing it yourself, you don't have a baseline. You don't have documents already in place. When you're working with an organization like us at Charles IT, we do this for hundreds of clients. And so we have, all of the different documents that we've used over 100 different times with a bunch of revisions, and we understand like where to start. So this is a great tool to be able to use it to basically find out, where do I start if I don't have anything, or check the document that you have, like where are the holes, right? Like what are some potential like concerns with this document? Where could I still fall, subject to misinterpretation or even a potential risk? But the really cool part, and what I think, again, doesn't replace a person or a firm like Charles IT, is specifically about the compliance requirements. Just because you can type in the specific regulation of NIST into ChatGPT and say, explain it to me like I'm in 5th grade, that's great. And that'll help you understand the things that we're looking for or asking about, and what that compliance is really digging into. But you still have to be able to produce that evidence and be able to show that you are doing the certain things that it's requiring. I think the real beauty behind it is it now takes something that is super complicated and super technical, which is the NIST framework, and allows somebody to break that thing down into something that anybody can understand. I think that's one of the really, really cool parts of it, tied to the compliance sector.
I think the other part of like compliance, if you think about good info security compliance, one of the things that these code generation tools like Code Whisperer, and GitHub Copilot are doing, or they're allowing you to scan your code for security vulnerabilities, and then also coming up with how you would fix that. So if you think about like how much time, and it's not wasted time doing this, but it's a lot of time that's not producing code that is generating revenue, is done like fixing info security bugs. This is like, these tools can help you now scan that, come up with the code, implement that code quickly to keep you within compliance without having to like just spend as much time, having those valuable programmers writing that code outright. One other area we're using AI for compliance is actually looking at customer usage and licensing. So depending on the type of business you have, at NASDAQ we sell data. It's one of the types of products that we sell, and people subscribe to that, and they pick the number of licenses, and then it's kind of like honor system where they'll put it in, and then periodically they'll get audited, and they might get a surprise like, geez, it looks like I should have had 100 licenses, but I only had 20. Now look at all this back billing. And then of course that's not in the forecast, and it's really problematic for firms. But what we found was we could use AI to look at firms and say, okay, what are the number of licenses? What are they paying? And is that consistent with the size of the company, how many employees they have, their market cap, all of these things? And then suggest like, geez, this is a flag. This is kind of, they're being billed in an anomalous way. You should talk to them early. And it's been really nice because we talk to these firms and we say, hey, you just signed up for this new product. I noticed you only have like X number of licenses. For your company your size, they generally would have more. And they're like, oh, good catch. Now I can put that in the forecast. I don't get slapped with some back billing or something later. So you can think about like revenue capture just by analyzing your accounts.
Yeah, and you pulled right on a heartstring there. We start talking about the finance side of the world and and how that impacts, and that's something that definitely near and dear to my heart. But the cool part about, like, you're talking about scanning for the vulnerabilities and telling you how to fix and remediate that type of stuff. There's tremendous cost savings there because example of anyone who's utilizing Microsoft and Office 365 and that suite of tools, like at some point, all of these are going to be integrated into the different SKUs that we use on a day-to-day basis. Similar to how like now Intune and a lot of the high security features are all tied into like a business premium license, which has become the gold standard. But you can potentially remove other tools and security expenses that you have because some of these tools are going to start doing that for you, which like scanning the code for vulnerabilities and making sure that, a programmer didn't leave, some open vulnerability within it. So I think that part is really cool. And there's other things that you can do as well that tie specifically to, I think of an example of like in the insurance industry, right? So you have the producers that are the ones that are selling the policies and educating the clients on the different insurance and what they should have for premiums and deductibles and all of that space. But then that client might have questions and they call into the office and they get on the phone with one of the reps in the office, and that person doesn't know the answer besides like, hey, you have a premium of 5 million, and they're like, what does that mean? And you can use prompts and set up those individuals with ways to be able to respond to that by giving them the ability to type that question in and have it analyze their document. So I'd be hard pressed to believe that that's not something that's going to be integrated into some of the mainstream platforms across a bunch of the different industries.
Yeah, it's like you have an actuary just sitting with you, with your help desk person.
Yep, exactly.
Great, thanks guys. Just so you guys know, we are working right now to try and get Joe back in. Having a little technical difficulties on his side, it looks like, but we'll try and get him back on here before the end of this. So for now, we'll move forward. And also just to put it out there as well, we do have the Q&A session at the end. So if anyone does have any questions throughout any of these slides or any of these conversations, please submit a question there or in the chat, wherever you deem necessary. But we'll be happy to answer your questions at the end. So moving forward, for now, we got some frequently asked questions about generative AI in a business environment. So the first one here, what are the challenges of implementing generative AI in a business environment? And I feel like we've touched on this a little bit, but if you guys want to go a little bit more in depth.
Yeah, I think one of the number one challenges is around IP. So if you think about what it means to be patentable, like if you're trying to patent something, it has to be both novel and has to be something that was created by a human. Right? There's like that classic case of when they tried to patent this this photograph that a monkey had taken, and they found out like, well, nope, you cannot patent that. It was not created by a human, and therefore, yeah, it's not applicable. And so here we've got lots of content that's not generated by a human, it's generated by the AI. And so who owns it? And when we were working with the cloud providers, they're saying, well, we certainly don't own it because, like, for instance, if you asked it a question and the response was like, first paragraph from Harry Potter, they don't want to like claim rights to that. That's not theirs. And then neither should you, though. So you can't really claim that that's yours either. You didn't generate it. And so this is actually one of the things, when we're working with the regulators, we just met with the White House not too long ago, about last week or week before. This was one of the items we brought up, is like slowing innovation in the space, is that the IP situation really hasn't been resolved, and it's slowing innovation and adoption, because they're like, I don't want to spend all this money and then not own it.
Yeah, I didn't even think about it from that side. I think for me and maybe this is just the organizations that I spend my time connecting with, is it's really about getting the people to use the tools, right? Because you might have access to ChatGPT, but you don't know the right way to use it, or it's not in your normal workflow, where a lot of changes is like, this is my process, this is what I follow, and you continue to run down that same path, but you don't think to stop and say, should I run this through there so I can make it better, so I can make these tweaks? And a lot of organizations, I think that's the biggest challenge, especially outside of our two spaces, Mike, where we have technology in our face all day, right? And so it's a little bit easier for us to adopt and run with, rather than someone that is potentially in like the manufacturing space, notorious for older machinery and older equipment, and you see some of the organizations that are adopting technology becoming the leaders in that space, rather than on the grassroots style of how manufacturing once was. And so I think that is really the bigger challenge, is getting just your normal everyday employee to be able to adopt using generative AI in their workflow.
Yeah, in a safe way as well, right? It's like, yeah. So I do think having some sort of, well, both from the top down, having support for these type of tools, like for instance, at NASDAQ, our CEO, Adina, is directly asking her leaders, how are you leveraging these technologies in order to improve your business? Because whether it's the legal group, the marketing group, or our product groups, they all should have some way that they're interacting with these tools and taking advantage of the wave that's going on like right now. This is kind of like the advent of the internet came out, or mobile technology just came out. And it's like, if you're not thinking about how that's going to change your business, you're going to be left behind. This is very similar. So you think about it from a top down, you shouldn't just expect like, oh, well, my people know what they're doing. I'll just assume that they're going to adopt these. Really should be asking those questions, like, how are you doing it, and come back to me. What are your plans for testing this stuff out, integrating it, and making sure we're leveraging it to the extent that we can.
Yeah.
Great. Let's move on. Go to frequently asked question number 2. How can businesses measure the success of their generative AI initiatives? I know this is a huge thing in business. Everybody wants to be able to track everything, see what the ROI is and all that stuff. So, Sal, that's kind of your world, I guess, in a sense, finance and operations. So you want to kick this off and see what you got to say?
Yeah, I think for me, the best way to measure the success of it is what does the output look like, right? So right now, most organizations have a set of KPIs and metrics that they're currently tracking within their business. And once you start to implement generative AI into the workflows, the expectation of once you do that is that that said output is now going to be increased and or potentially decreased if we're talking on the flip side of say, hey, I'm trying to optimize my schedule for the day for a certain billable percentage target, right? And you can optimize that using a generative AI tool, and so you're going to be increasing your efficiency throughout your day, or even some of the processes that may have been manual in the past. There's a lot of different things that you can use in it, and it really depends on your space. Like I know in the IT world right now, there's a lot of AI tools out there for triaging and handling like first call type tickets and things that are coming in. Same thing in the dispatching for like legal and help for like a ambulance, 911. There's a lot of like AI triaging type stuff going on in those spaces, and based on the KPIs for like time to like answer that call and route to the correct person, and a lot of those different things are creating a lot of efficiencies, and that's a place for you to start to look to where that measuring might be useful.
Yeah, I think for us, I think about it in like two different ways. One are kind of the KPIs, like you mentioned, Sal, where you've got the KPIs you're already tracking for your business. Now, how am I seeing a difference in those? And I think you could get even more specific in that arena towards some of the generative coding tools. So, for instance, the Gen AI tools like Code Whisperer will allow you to track and see like how much code is being generated, lines of code, what's the percentage being committed, and how often is it being used. And I think right now is the time where if your engineering teams are using that, then you should be looking at that and saying, okay, if I'm not getting the uptake, why is it? Because we've noticed that as we saw, like people were in there, they're all excited about it, and then all of a sudden it dropped off precipitously, and we found, oh, it's because our authentication was set like every hour instead of every day. So we just had to change a parameter, and we saw, okay, now we see our level of engagement go back up. So as these things are developing, you want to look at those metrics so you can respond to it, so you can continue to get the uptick. But the other metric, I think, is just even engagement. Like how much are these tools actually being used, and how much are people engaging in these tools? Because the output from them can be so great, and in some ways it could be subjective. Like for instance, in the creative space, you'd be like, how much more creative are you being with these tools? It's like, well, I don't know. I can't put a number on that. But just the fact that you're using them means that you're probably getting quite a bit of benefit out of it, and we're creating better products, or you're faster at iterating. And so even just measuring the engagement in the different areas of your business and say, okay, how much engagement am I getting here versus there, is a good thing to track.
Yeah, for sure. I actually had a conversation with one of our manufacturing clients, specifically tied around AI and some of the tools that they're coming out with for like quality control and how you can assess like the rate of quality, and then that allows you to like predetermine the like the maintenance that your machine that's creating those might need based on how the percentage of defects are coming from that specific machine. So it's predicting different types of like maintenance and things that you might need. So there's all kinds of really cool ways to really dive into it and see how it can help your business.
Yeah, great. So moving on to freaking desk question number 3. Now this is pretty generic, but where is generative AI going? And Mike, I'll let you kick that off.
All right. Well, so the initial set of models in generative AI were all built off of public data from the internet. So there's kind of a famous article that came out, like a leaked memo from Google that said, we have no moat. And it's basically anyone with a spare $100 million can go out and build their own set of Gen AI models. And actually, nowadays it wouldn't cost nearly that. That's what it cost to build the first ChatGPT models. But subsequent ones wouldn't cost that much, and anyone really could do it because it's built with public data. So where it's going is now everyone across the industries, like every Fortune 500 company for sure, and many other companies outside of that, are all investing heavily here. Like every forum I go to, every industry panel I'm on, everyone is saying, yep, we've got like 10 POCs, 20 POCs, 100 POCs in this area. So they're all looking at it, and they're all looking at how they can leverage their private data for making models smarter than they would be just on that public data. So that's one thing you could just, like, that's going to be a hard trend. You will absolutely see these models now get very smart at very niche things where private data is involved.
Yeah, I think for me, it's Mike hit it on the head there, and I know Joe, before he departed here, talked about that a little bit before that. We're in the infancy right now. There is so much more to come from this, that the most important thing you should be doing right now is getting involved, figuring out how it can help you, how it can be a part of your business, and just continue to stay on top of the space, because it's going to continue to provide value for those who are taking advantage of it.
Simple as that, huh? Look at this. So moving on to number 4 here, we're cutting it close on time, and I do want to get to the Q&A. We do have a couple questions in there. So last but not least, on the frequently asked questions, what advice would you give to business owners who are considering using generative AI?
Well, maybe just look at your business and what are areas where you're generating new assets, new content, whether that content is code or that content is material, manuals. It's very good for providing, like, if you needed a user manual for something, you can put in like all your layman's terms and then it can spell that out. Or you can feed it, even now since it's multimodal, you can upload images and it can pull text out and things like that, and start to build those assets for you. So just think about your business and your area. Where are we actually generating content? We're using humans for that. Or where are we analyzing lots of content? Where do I have to read documents, read emails, pouring through a bunch of things where some human is sitting there and they're having to understand and go through a bunch of material? Those are areas that are like high potential and where this could really add a lot of value.
Yeah, and Sal, before you go, I just want to interrupt real quick and just say, I want to start with, like, I know for Charles IT in particular, a lot of what we deal with is healthcare, the healthcare industry. So if you want to talk specifically about healthcare, and then I'm going to ask anyone in the audience, if you guys have a specific industry that you'd like to point out here, then we can try and target you guys directly and give you some more targeted advice here. So, but if you want to kick off with healthcare style, that would be awesome. Yeah.
So I think as far as like, if you're in the healthcare space, like where can you benefit from generative AI? Like there's a bunch of different places that you can kind of jump in here. And I think the first part is determining what are some of the business processes and workflows that you currently do that can be automated, right? It's where are different places that can be used. I know that there right now there's a tool out there that will basically follow along click by click and step through what you're doing in a day-to-day basis, and it will actually output and screenshot like where the click happened. It'll basically create an entire like procedure for you based out of you just scrolling through your normal workflow, and being able to take those things and translate those into training materials and documents to give to your employees during like an onboarding or something like that, where in the healthcare space, we're seeing a tremendous amount of of churn right now from people either entering or exiting that space. But with the amount of new hires coming on across the entire industry, the need to be able to get employees up to speed quick enough is going to be one of the limiting factors to most organizations. So connecting with someone who understands that AI space, whether you're working with a provider, whether you have someone in your network that may, be well versed in the generative AI space, it's just talking to them, getting more aware of the different capabilities that it has and where it could potentially benefit your business. The best thing you can do is, it comes back to the standard concept of networking, where the more you talk with people, the more you understand the different things that are coming down the pipeline in regards to AI, and the better you can leverage those within the business.
Awesome. And then, Mike, if you have anything else to add, otherwise we can move on to the Q&A.
Yeah, let's go into the Q&A.
Sure. So like I said, if anyone in the audience has any questions, feel free to throw them in there now. We'll try and get to them before we close it out here. But the first one we have in here is, can you elaborate further on the internal instances of private Gen AI? Were those homegrown private internal instances or off-the-shelf systems available to others?
Yeah, so I'll give you, for instance, so Microsoft Azure has their own instances. So you can create your own instance in Azure and then connect to OpenAI through their APIs. So obviously Microsoft and OpenAI have a relationship, since that's what happens when you give them $12 billion. So yeah, so you can get private instances that way. There are also a number of tools, like Amazon. They have their Bedrock technologies, and when you create an instance in your AWS account, you can then implement a number of generative AI models, including Titan and some of even the open source models, or Anthropic, any of those specifically within your instance, and then that's not leaving your walled garden. So just think, if you're just calling the OpenAI APIs directly, or if you're pasting stuff into ChatGPT, you're not protected. Like you're not using a walled instance, and so your data is not safe. So you should just use that for things where if it was pushed out to the public, it wouldn't be catastrophic for your company, and be like, okay, maybe it's annoying, but there's not going to be a media article published on this or something.
Awesome. Appreciate that, Mike. We had another question here. I'm very interested in utilizing AI in the manufacturing space. I have multiple use cases I'd like to start with. And I've played around with AI outside of work and done some cool things with it, but I'm not comfortable dropping any proprietary information, even our legal documents, into anything fully open. So I'm at a bit of a standstill until I can find a platform I can safely use. Are there any suggestions that you have?
Well, one, when Office 365 Copilot comes out, they should be able to provide a private instance there. So now everyone should be able to have access to that and be able to use this in a safer way. But until that, there are other tools that provide, especially in the legal space, like Conga and LexisNexis have tools that do have some of those private capabilities. But yeah, it depends on what you're specifically looking for and whether or not you already pay for those tools.
Right. And I think, building off that, one of the questions I think everyone is wondering is, how do I find the right AI tools for my needs for a specific business? And like, I know from my experience, I know none of you guys can see me, but like, I've realized that social media is a huge help for that. Like a Twitter feed or something like that is, if it's accustomed to what you're used to looking at and all that stuff, that's where I will typically find the most helpful ones for the stuff that I'm looking for. But is there anything that you guys have seen, like any specific areas where you can go to actually dig down and find something more specific to industry or security or anything like that?
Well, I will say there's a startup called Hugging Face, odd name, but very popular. They're getting huge amounts of investment and they're absolutely blowing up. So not quite as much as OpenAI, but they are actually, I mean, billions of dollars are going into them as well. And that's a great community to find AI models that might suit your business. So that's like, you basically think of it as like a marketplace for all things AI. So you can find models, you can find data sets, all sorts of stuff, and just shop around in there. So that's probably the most popular place to go looking for this type of stuff.
Noted on my end too. Thanks, Mike. Sal, you got anything to wrap up here before we close it out?
Yeah, I don't believe currently that there are any AI, like generative AI platforms that are like GDPR compliant or anything that, you know, is completely safeguarded from your data. And so I do think that there's still a concern with entering in, you know, anything. I know that Brian in the chat had brought up like any of his legal documents or anything like that. And, you know, the question there is how do you modify those documents prior to entering them into a platform that you do use, so that it might remove, you know, that proprietary information out and potentially still give you the access that you're looking for to make some tweaks and changes while they're still working through the compliance part of it. But I think there are definitely workarounds through it. And as Mike mentioned before, there are some private instances and platforms that you can utilize now to be able to use it within your business, especially if you're in one of the highly regulated industries.
Awesome. Well, that about wraps it up. Right 1 o'clock on the dot. That's awesome. So we appreciate you guys attending today. I know you guys took some time out of your busy schedules to be here. Mike, we thank you for being here again. It's always a pleasure working with you, having your expertise on. We love that. So just so you guys know, if you want to stay up to date with Charles IT, you can follow us on any of our socials that's listed on there. If you have any questions or any sales inquiries whatsoever, hello at Charles IT. You can call into any of our offices at any time. All attendees will receive a recording of this presentation, of the whole webinar, I should say, tomorrow morning. And then what else? Yeah, I think that about wraps it up. So yeah, we thank you guys. We appreciate all your time, and we'll be signing off now. So
Thanks, Jack.
you'll hear from us tomorrow. Mike, appreciate you again, always. So thanks everybody. Hope you enjoyed.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jack. Thanks, Sal.